This cheater discovers that when combined, lies and extramarital relationships don't look nearly as nice as pearls. My preoccupied spouse was involved in an affair with a worker. I ensured that our children understood the type of mother they had. I've written this 3 times, but I always end up erasing it before I publish it. However, it seems like the 3rd time is a charm. To finally get it off my chest by expressing it here also seems like some kind of broken kind of therapy. My wife, Sarah, 41, and I, a 44-year-old man, have been together for over 14 years. We live in a lovely suburban home with 2 children. Not that things were horrible, but foreseeable. We put in a lot of work, raised our children, and occasionally tried to leaven things up by going on a date night. I've known Greg, our common buddy, since college when we first got together. After earning her degree, Sarah had recently returned to the city, and Greg felt that we would click. I wasn't really searching for something serious at the moment. Greg continued pushing us in the direction of one another, even though I was not in the greatest of moods after ending a long-term relationship. Sarah didn't appear to be trying too hard, and she was a pleasure to chat to. I had no desire to find love. I was more interested in being present and lighthearted. Even before I was convinced I wanted to be involved in anything meaningful, I informed her. That sounded as acceptable to her. But even so, the conversation quickly became serious. We continued to text and hang out together. I didn't understand I loved being around her until after 3 months, much like, and I was all in without even seeing it at first. It was a simple romantic beginning. But it worked. We moved in together after dating for almost 2 years. To be honest, I hadn't given marriage any thought at all. But one evening, as is our habit, Sarah brought it up in passing as we were watching TV, and we both thought it made sense. We were organizing a tiny wedding with only close friends and family the next thing I knew. We didn't really plan for the kids either, to be honest. Our first happened approximately a year after we were married, but since we were both happy, we decided to accept it. A few years later, the second child was born, and life suddenly became quite hectic, both in terms of working and parenting. Sarah spends a lot of late evenings and weekends away from her job as an event planner. I used to take great pride in how much I trusted her. After all, she appeared to always be where she said she would be, and I never gave her any cause to mistrust me. I eventually developed a rather strong trust in her as a result of it. It is hard to believe that is irrational. As ridiculous as it may seem right now, one important detail to the narrative is that my wife adores pearls. The pearl pieces I've gotten her throughout the years have to be her favorite jewelry items. She had an odd obsession with pearls, which struck me as funny considering how much she detested oysters. She would fuss about whether or not the companies from which I purchased the pearls were procuring them ethically. Although I didn't really care, I had to be sure because she would complete her assignment. I lived up to all the pearl love you've given me throughout the years. On our wedding, I got her a pearl necklace. On our 5th anniversary, I got her a bracelet, and for our 10th, I got her earrings. Were from pricey companies that guaranteed an entirely ethical agricultural approach. She was almost infatuated with them. Every function she attended, she wore at least one piece, and on rare occasions, all 3, as if they were some kind of lucky charm or something. They wouldn't come out of their box if it wasn't a particular occasion or event. You can only imagine how shocked I was one day when I was washing laundry and discovered her beloved earrings, which she hadn't worn in months, stashed in the coat pocket. Just before throwing the clothing in the washing basket, I was filling up the clothes and making sure the pockets were empty. And there they were. I gifted her those little pearl stud earrings on our anniversary. She always wore the same earrings for work-related matters or formal occasions. She relied on them, so observing them crammed like spare change into a coat pocket, yes, that was concerning. When she wasn't wearing them, they were in the velvet-lined boxes they came in. I tried not to seem suspicious as I asked her inane questions about it. She dismissed it with a chuckle, explaining that she had removed them following an occasion and had forgotten to replace them. She laughed, but not to the point of tears. I'm not sure whether everyone got what I was saying. Her eyes were displaying something that didn't set well with me. I've known her long enough to read her nonverbal cues. My first genuine sense that things wasn't right was when I felt like she was brushing me off. At that point, I started to piece together all the strange details I had previously seen but ignored. I had to spend the night as a spy. I made an effort to complete every task in an understated manner. All of a sudden, I'm keeping a closer eye on her, mentally noting her schedule and contrasting her claims with what appears realistic. I was like a detective checking her social media after every late-night meeting, attempting to piece together her tale from any internet crumbs I could discover. It was really draining, especially because I wasn't making any progress at all. Attempting to complete a problem with half of the components missing was like that. She was meticulous, or at least cautious enough to avoid leaving any trace. Then, one Friday evening, she tells me she's off to a large event she's arranging with a customer at a downtown hotel restaurant. She mentioned that she might not return until after midnight. I thought I would perform a short stakeout because I was feeling so strongly about following her at this point. Just to make sure she was where she claimed to be. You know, I could have paid a private investigator, but because I didn't yet have anything I could stake my life on, I preferred to save the money. At around 9 o'clock at night, I drove to the hotel, parked where I could see the entrance, and waited. Her automobile is nowhere to be found. I stood there looking at the door like a complete moron for more than an hour, if not more, in the hopes that she would come out and disprove my theory. But no, Sarah wasn't me. I could feel my chest getting really tight at this time. Everything I had been attempting to ignore seemed to be realizing itself. She was not in the place she claimed to be. So my only question was, if she wasn't at the hotel, where in the world was she going to be at that hour of the night? While I returned home, and she wasn't there. That night, something in me shifted. At that point, I made the decision to improve. She must have been one step ahead of me since I've been attempting to check her phone anytime I have the opportunity. She has her applications set to erase messages, and half of her texts were removed. I was spying, so I couldn't just ask her why. That would have revealed my identity. Furthermore, it would have been odd to ask her personally because we constantly had access to each other's phones. She had rather boring social media too, I began to notice. I mean, how on earth was she landing these jobs managing events? There weren't many posts on her accounts concerning the projects she claimed to be working on. It seemed as though she was trying to hide her true intentions while maintaining an orderly appearance. I seem to recall thinking for a split second that my wife may have been a discreet escort. Still, that was a dumb guess. But at that moment, I had no idea what to do. I began to believe that facing her head-on was the only way out of this situation. I was about to give up on driving myself insane by sneaking about, but not before I had this thought. Critical remarks about the arts, traditional tracking methods. The money is not something I think about. Generally speaking, I hadn't been. I used to let her take care of the majority of the shopping and payments since I didn't want to micromanage such things. Though I had finally gotten exactly what I wanted, I still trusted her. It was easy to identify. She had a different card for all of that. So the payments for upscale meals and hotel stays in locations we had never visited together were not work costs either. I was particularly struck by one accusation. One hotel wasn't even located in our city. It was far from her workplace. And when I checked it up, it turned out to be one of those upscale locations frequented by couples. Not the type of venue you would want to hold business meetings. I was wondering at the time if the meetings she had been holding in teams were really work-related sessions. She would constantly be contacting her coworker on that app at night about something really essential. She's always been a workaholic, after all, and despite my best efforts, I can never seem to get her to unwind. I had a hard time even separating the real from the fake. I was aware that she had a legitimate job and was frequently really busy, but it appeared as though she concealed her other activities behind the rest of the chaos. And then, suddenly, the possibility that she was having an affair with a coworker really dawned on me. It nearly had to be for someone as busy as she was. When I had the chance to examine her phone again, I opened her work applications first because they weren't secured in any manner. Since she opened in Teams more than 100 times a day, any form of lock would have only made her move more slowly. She was DMing someone, and by the look of it, I got the impression that person was lower up in the company hierarchy than she was. There, they were having pretty graphic chats. One item that almost caused me to throw away my phone was a lengthy messaging thread in which they discussed their ideal postures and how they ought to do that one the next time, sprinkling in occasional genuine conversation about work. To be honest, it hurt like hell to see all of it, but I was glad that I had discovered it. Ultimately, it constituted the initial and sole tangible proof I possessed. I took care to capture the entire event on camera and transfer the proof to my own phone. I needed to make sure I had everything I needed. She hasn't noticed anything since the screen recording incident approximately 3 weeks ago, but even my kids have noticed, so it must have been hurting me more than I had imagined. I've been asked whether I'm feeling all right, and I admit that I didn't look my best. I look like terrible, and I haven't been eating or sleeping well. I can't bring myself to tell them what's really going on though, so they don't know. What should I do next is all that's on my mind. Living with an unfaithful wife is difficult, but I know that I can't take any snap decisions since my children will be witness to it. I can't stop worrying about my children and what a divorce from her might entail for them. I mean, it's not all about me. They will find themselves stranded in the midst of this. And it feels like a part of me wants to discuss this with you. However, I'm already aware of her next words. Even today, I'm at a loss for what to do. My thoughts have been wandering aimlessly. Shall I simply walk away and see how it works? I find myself thinking about our children all the time. I feel as like I'm betraying them in that sense, as I've always tried to be a very good parent to them. This isn't just any old flag that I can ignore. This is my spouse and my children's mother. I've even considered having a conversation with my brother. Being a lawyer, he may be able to offer some guidance. Perhaps he might advise me on how to proceed, but would that require me to reveal this entire issue, or should I simply stay? Maybe I should simply do my thing if she's doing hers. When I'm feeling playful, I'm sure I could find someone to screw about with. Perhaps I could even the score and have my own affair. I'm not sure. Is that a dumb move? What are your thoughts, guys? Am I crazy to think of staying? It's true that cheating back might make me feel more equal, but I'll always want to take further and further steps to ensure that her debt is satisfied. I would much prefer sleep around as a bachelor if I am going to do that. Plus, I can get rather dirty when I have my own flings. Right now, I have no need of debt at all. Yes, I believe that I will ultimately inform my brother about this, as I feel that I need a close confidante. I see why you may think of just remaining up, especially for the kids, but it can be really taxing to stay in a situation where there is so much hurt not just for you, but for them as well. Youngsters are more perceptive than we think. Revision. The last several months seem to have passed in a whirl. Both my brother and many of your responses have been really helpful. How I've survived this long without going absolutely insane is beyond me. When I initially informed my brother, a lawyer, about everything, he wasn't holding back. He bluntly warned me that continuing in this marriage will ruin not just myself but also the children more than ending it would. He warned me that things would grow worse the longer I waited. At first, I wasn't inclined to trust him, since nobody likes to acknowledge that their marriage is finished. But his point was well made. Sarah could fabricate a story if I don't take immediate action, and she believes I am aware of her infidelity. She is shrewd enough to turn the kids against me, and perhaps even ruin my finances. I also didn't need to continue living with a lady who would just make me hate her more and more every day. Not long after that conversation with him, I began the process of filing for divorce. I knew I had to defend the kids and myself, but I wasn't looking for a protracted court struggle. It was already an excruciating procedure, and I couldn't let her take the story in a different direction. I explained it to my brother. I told him I wanted things to go quickly, and he agreed. There was no justification for this to continue. Even so, I realized I had to play it extremely cool, particularly when children were involved. I chose to play back specific clips from the screen recording that demonstrated my wife's adultery, excluding any explicit content like the frequent messages that said "I love you, I miss you." And "When are we going to see again?" which I had seen in the direct messages. They were old enough to understand what was going on. I am aware that many of you would argue that I should give my kids the truth, rather than try to preserve their perception of their mother. But hell is open to her. It's preferable that kids have an early understanding of her character. I was no longer just pretending to be a loving father who was duped. I was going to be the kind dad who got cheated on and became bad. After everything, I couldn't stand it if they hated me, so I made sure there would be someone else for them to hate on when that time came. I took it right to the core. Sarah's employer had a strong policy against fraternization and forbade managers from having romantic relationships with staff members. I knew it too, since she talked about it so often and was well aware of it. I suppose I had to take advantage of that. I collected all of my evidence, including hotel receipts, credit card bills, emails, and other documents. The next weekend, I submitted an anonymous tip to her HR division. My desire was to strike her where it truly hurt. Her occupation. I was aware that she would die. Let's fast forward to the next Tuesday. She sobbed when she got home. Like very really horrible sobbing. Obviously, I was a moron. Knowing exactly what was going on, I asked her what was wrong. At first, she remained silent. Simply didn't stop crying, shoved me aside and left in a fury. She informed me the next day that she had been granted some time off and had not gone into work. Yes, exactly. I didn't dispute or push back. I simply bided my time till it was ideal, and I gave her the divorce papers somewhere in the evening. Her face should have been on display. It appeared as though a vehicle had struck her. She needed a few moments to make the connection between the documents I had just served her and the turmoil at work. She had a severe breakdown. She was sobbing so badly, in fact, that the children came in to see what was wrong. At that point, I pulled out my collage of texts and placed them down. I wasn't subtle about it. Both of them were in their teens. I informed them up front that their mother had committed some terrible crimes. I used my words with caution. Although I didn't want to permanently harm them, I also wasn't going to lie. Naturally, Sarah became agitated, hurling objects, yelling at me, attempting to portray herself as the victim, and attempting to silence me. That was not how I had ever seen her, and clearly my kids hadn't either. They were therefore really afraid. I led the children into my room. I shut the door and bided my time till everything subsided. After some time, I loaded the kids' already packed suitcases into the car and headed to my parents' house. To give everyone some room, we spent some time staying there. The weeks that ensued were quite harsh. Sarah, after all, was phoning everyone we knew to provide her version of events, saying something like everything had been a mistake. It was amusing because while I hadn't informed anybody save my parents and brother, she was contacting them all, trying to get me to walk, and embarrassing herself in the process. I can't really waste my time arguing with people, so when some of those pals contacted or texted, I just forwarded them the screenshots I had, the unedited version. Our attorneys exchanged letters in an attempt to complete the divorce. I won the settlement and the home, which was great, as well as partial custody of the kids who, after all the drama, didn't want to spend much time with her, and a sizable portion of our funds. She attempted to argue with me about it, but she was helpless due to the amount of proof she had to show that she had spent money from our account, which was intended to be used for childcare on her affair partner. It absolutely stinks that custody ended up 6-0-4-0 in my favor despite her violent outburst adultery and the kids' refusal to live with her. I find it annoying, but I have to accept the fact that women are treated so unfairly in the court system. It seemed to me that she quit her work shortly after the scandal broke. I suppose rumors spread, and she had a terrible reputation at work. Given Sarah's character, I doubt she left on her own volition. She was either made to leave or demoted. She was unable to cope with whatever it was. I turned to go, which, in spite of everything, made me smile a little. She attempted to seem like everything was all right when we recently had to get together for a family gathering one of the children's birthdays. But she's obviously having trouble. I'm getting the type of closure I never imagined I'd receive as I see her falling. It's more rewarding to watch her navigate the consequences of her decisions than it would have been to apologize. Though I'm not happy right now, my life isn't great either. I can live without having to deal with falsehoods and mistrust all the time, at least. That chapter is permanently closed. Even though what you had to do to protect yourself and your kids was extremely difficult, you did what was to be done. Knowing how terrible it may be on your family, it took courage to speak up for yourself and tell others around you the truth. There's never an easy way to approach a situation like this, in my opinion, but it's clear that your main concerns were protecting the children from harm and making sure they realized the truth of what was happening. Despite everything you went through, the legal system can be extremely difficult in these situations, particularly with the disparity in custody. However, it's encouraging to see that the children can recognize the reality for themselves. Their unwillingness to spend time with her says a lot about them. You seem to have been making every effort to be the steady parent kids require at this time.